Hello, everybody. My name's Jim, and I felt it would be a little unfair to never talk about my 6 5-star reads that convinced me to create a Booktube channel in the first place. All of the books that I'm going to review today were read in 2022. I've already uploaded individual reviews for some of them, but for others, I've only either mentioned them in passing or not at all. So here they are all together. As a side note, I had to write a script for this because otherwise I'd take 20 minutes at least per book and they'd all be spoiled. So the script will keep everything spoiler free. Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black is the book that I've mentioned the most on this channel and is the focus of one of my longest spoiler-free reviews. It's an epistolary novel about a dying man named Jacob who is writing to his gay son Isaac. In his letters, he is simultaneously coming to terms with his impending death as well as how he treated his family. Had this book not been through Jacob's perspective, he easily could have been marked off as irredeemable, and that's one thing that makes this book so great. He does very unlikable, awful, closed-minded, abusive things, but he takes accountability and attempts to mend. However, as far as an apology, it feels too little too late, and it's really up to you to see if he accomplishes what he's setting out to do. This book is a gut punch from letter to letter, and if you read it, it will claw at you from the inside out. Jacob's life was difficult. Generational trauma reared its head as he got older and had a family of his own. It's a hard read, but it's an important read. I do have to warn you, though, go into this with caution. There are more trigger warnings in this book than I can list in this video. Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valenti is another book that I reviewed for this channel. I read this in October of last year since I assumed it was horror, but it leans more toward mystery and thriller. This is the book where I coined daytime horror. Sophia, the main character, is living in this perfect, beautiful neighborhood in her perfect, beautiful house with her perfect, beautiful husband. But as you read, she begins to uncover that maybe things aren't as perfect as she once thought. Small clues here and there cause these notions to unravel, and for such a short book, the discovery was spread out so well. The only gripe, if you can even call it that, was that there were some on-the-nose horror elements that I didn't feel were necessary, but they didn't take me out of the book. The book creeped me out regardless. And as a side note, as someone who recently moved not too long ago, I really enjoyed reading the HOA covenants that broke up each chapter. I thought they were super clever and a little outrageous. Unfollow is a memoir by Megan Phelps Roper. If you're unfamiliar with Westboro Baptist Church, just Google them. They pick it anywhere, but they most notoriously target soldiers' funerals and use homophobic signs, chants, and songs to spread their toxic message under the guise of Christianity. Megan Phelps Roper grew up in this environment, and this memoir is about what led up to and followed her escape from it. Reading about the inner workings of this church, which is a term I use loosely, was so intense, and I need to say that this was all Megan knew for a long time, so she deserves a bit of grace, I think. She attended public school, and she knew she was different, but she always assumed she was the righteous one going to heaven while the rest of her class was doomed. This was her life. So imagine the internal storm that she had to weather just to unlearn all that she knew and start to think on her own. I have nothing but love and respect for her and her strength. I have watched so many interviews and TED Talks featuring her. She is a wonderful speaker, and her story is truly empowering. This was not an easy journey. Everybody Sees the Ants by A.S. King hit a bit too close to home. It's about a boy named Lucky who starts off the story by sending a survey to his classmates asking how they would prefer to off themselves. He did this, from what I remember, as a way of impressing or getting closer to one of his bullies, and it's something that I can relate to because I also attempted to impress my bullies by acting completely out of character. And just like Lucky, that artificial friendship was only temporary in my case too. Not only that, but his parents didn't want to fully believe that it was happening, but they also had issues of their own that needed sorting. So one day, the bullying turned physical, and Lucky's mom put her foot down and brought him to stay with his aunt and uncle. Personally, I loved Lucky as the angsty main character, and his mom reminded me so much of my own mom. I actually had my mom read this book too. I loved their bond and how they grew during their summer away from home. And for those who like a little magical element, Lucky would visit his grandpa in his dreams. His grandpa served in the Vietnam War, I think, and after every dream, Lucky would wake up with a memento from that dream. So maybe it wasn't necessary, but despite only showing up in his dreams, his grandpa gives Lucky some great advice throughout the novel. All of Lucky's closest relationships are ones that I enjoyed watching grow, and I appreciated his humor. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson is a book that I struggled to believe was horror from time to time. This is from the perspective of Mary Catherine, aka Mary Cat, and how she views the townsfolk around her after a tragic poisoning occurred during a dinner with her family in which only she, her sister Constance, and her uncle Julian survived. By the way, I loved Uncle Julian in this book. The town is full of gossip. Wherever Mary Cat goes, the whispers start. And while the story is charming and funny through the POV of a child, the townsfolk have their haunting moments especially. If you look at the cover, they're not holding torches, but it appears as though they're torch-lit. Great imagery, and it perfectly encompasses how they treat Mary Cat and her surviving family. Throughout the book, you discover what happened during that dinner as the town's feelings escalate. I love this. It was the perfect end to 2022. It just barely missed my Booktube channel's conception and was the main reason why I wanted to make this video. Now, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee is the reason I have a script. This is my favorite book. I've mentioned that before, but it's so intimidating as a reviewer because I would want to spoil it. It checks so many boxes for me. It's historical fiction, it's multi-generational, and it's multi-POV. Because of it crossing a number of generations, some of my favorite characters and the ones that I want to talk about most don't pop up until about halfway through. That and the blurb tells you everything and not enough at the same time. This story is grand, and I had very few gripes. If I ever do a spoiler review for this, I'll be sure to include those gripes, but otherwise, phenomenal book. I will say that this began my World War II burnout. The story first takes place in Korea before the split into North and South, and Japan during the war. It also covers Korea's relationship with Japan, how Korean immigrants were treated, religious oppression, and how this family overcame so many odds. There wasn't a single POV that I didn't find myself rooting for because they all did what they could to make their lives better, yet were constantly hit with spiky, flaming curveballs that knocked them off their feet. Even their smallest joys seemed huge, and to me, that was as real as a story could get. I love this book. I don't see it being replaced as my number one anytime soon. So if any of these interest you, click their Goodreads links in the description below, locate the retailer of your choice and purchase the books from there, or head over to your local library or use your library app to borrow them if they're available. Otherwise, I've been Jim, you've been great, happy reading!